All right. Welcome everyone. It's so good to have you all here. My name is Brenna Marcichek. I'm the Director of Outreach with Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, and I also coordinate the Bird Collision Corps program. We have a couple from the program on tonight. So I'm really happy to have you all here and very happy to be co-hosting this with Lisa Gomnitz from SOS Save Our Songbirds and Becky Sapper from the Wisconsin Master Naturalist Program. So I think, Becky, if I can hand it over to you to do a quick intro to the Master Naturalist, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Brenna. Well, greetings from the Wisconsin Master Naturalist Program. My name is Becky Sapper, and I direct the Wisconsin Master Naturalist Program. I'm excited to see a couple names on the out there of some master naturalists, and so howdy to those of you who I know. For those of you who aren't familiar with the program, though, the Master Naturalist Program works with host organizations across our state to develop and support a network of well-informed volunteers and instructors that are dedicated to conservation service, leadership, and lifelong learning. And we appreciate the opportunity to partner with groups like Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance and Save Our Songbirds, who are providing opportunities for that lifelong learning tonight. And I encourage the Master Naturalists that are out there to report your time here today for advanced training hours in the Master Naturalist portal. I hope that everyone who's joining us tonight will be able to take what they learn and share that in their communities or with their organizations or even with your friends and family. If you're Master Naturalist and you do any educational programming around this topic, if you're doing it on behalf of an organization, please claim those hours as volunteer hours as well too. And I would just like to pass on a couple invitations to everyone attending today to consider joining the Master Naturalist Program at our Summit for Natural Resources Volunteers that we are going to be hosting September 26th to 28th. We're co-hosting with the Ho-Chunk Nation this year. And you don't need to be a master naturalist to participate, but it's a really great opportunity to be around other people who enjoy being out in nature and doing good works on behalf of our natural world. And if you're not a master naturalist and you're interested in becoming one, our 2025 training schedule will be out and available in December. And our website is the best way to find the information about the 2025 training season in December and about the summit. And I will put a link in the chat with our web address, or you're welcome to just Google Wisconsin Master Naturalist and we're sure to pop to the top there. But thanks for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to learning along with all of you as well today. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Becky. And Lisa, I'll pass it over to you as well. Share screen.
Great. Thank you, Brenna. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight, sharing a little bit of your evening and delaying your Olympics watching just a bit. I am the coordinator for SOS Save Our Songbirds. It's an action campaign that launched in March of 2023 at a statewide bird conference. And it came about because, we've been watching for years now this drumbeat of just negative news about birds, and just realizing that, our birds are in trouble. They're in trouble globally, in North America and in Wisconsin, and that people really wanted to do something. So this campaign launched, it's an initiative of the Wisconsin Bird Conservation Partnership, so a coalition of 180 groups dedicated to sustaining natural birds. And our idea is pretty simple. It's just to help people take 3 actions at home that will help birds. The first one is to add some native plants that are good for birds. A second is what we're talking about tonight, is protecting birds from colliding with windows. And a third one is recognizing that we also have to pay attention to our birds, where they go in winter and what's happening there. And so that is to buy coffee that is grown on farms that protect bird habitat. So those are the 3 steps, and just really excited to be here. And really the first bullet point I should have under how you can help is, if you haven't taken the 3 steps, to try those and to share what you do, because the power of sharing that with family and friends and neighbors is really makes a big difference. And then other ways to help would be to visit our website. From our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. And on there, you're going to find, or in the newsletter, we try to put kind of listings of some of the educational events that we're doing and that others are doing that relate to the 3 actions that we promote, and then native plant sales that are going on, webinars and festivals. And kind of finally is, because we were getting lots of requests to be at events, we pulled together a SOS toolkit that's got, the literature that we hand out, native plant guides, some other things, and then samples of bird-friendly coffee, yard signs, and then also window treatment kits. So I will put both our website and then we can order the toolkits in the chat. And thanks again for this opportunity, and I'll hand it back to you, Brenna.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Conservation really takes a village, so it's awesome to be able to partner with folks like Lisa and Becky and all of the different people who are on this call. There are lots of familiar names. So welcome to everyone who just joined in the last couple of minutes. We're just getting started here. So when you registered, you were asked to put the city that you live in or near, and if you volunteer with an organization that's relevant for what we're talking about tonight. And I'll just ask that you put that into the chat again tonight, because I think it's helpful for all of us on the call to be able to see where everyone's coming from, both geographically and figuratively. So if you could put that into the chat, that would be great, as well as any questions that you have throughout the presentation. We'll have a couple chances to unmute and ask questions, but if you think of anything along the way, feel free to type that into the chat, and I have that open and I'm keeping an eye on that and can answer questions as soon as I'm able. So just a brief introduction to Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance. We are a local nonprofit organization, a chapter of National Audubon, but a completely separate organization. We have a couple of board members on tonight. Jasmine Banks is a board member and Arlene Johnson is a former board member. So it's great to have both of you here. Our mission is to protect and celebrate birds. And there are 3 primary ways that we do that. One is through habitat restoration. So we own about 2,500 acres of land that we are actively restoring to native habitats to benefit birds and the people who love them. Those sanctuaries, for the most part, are free and open to the public. So you can go out to do some bird watching or bumblebee watching or plant searching, and just general exploring in those places. They're really wonderful places to be outside. We also have an education program where our educators work with primarily youth in the Madison area, and then also an advocacy program where we do citizen science and share with our members different issues that matter to birds and to the people who love them. So what we're talking about tonight is a bit of the education and advocacy work put together. And all of the work that we do is done in 10 counties in southern Wisconsin. So this map here shows that the 10 counties within our service area. So it's a really wonderful place to live and work. Okay, so back to collisions. Thank you everyone for putting into the chat where you're coming from. It's great to see so many different locations within Wisconsin and even beyond. So thank you for that. So our plan for tonight is we have 2 different parts to this evening. The main goal of this presentation is to provide you with resources that you need to share this information with your community. So it's sort of a train the trainers type of event. So I'm going to go through the presentation that I typically give to the public about window collisions and how to prevent them. And I have it annotated in certain ways so that I have some notes to go along with it that I'll share with you. And then I'll also talk a little bit about how you can bring this to your communities with different ideas and resources. So to get started, we're going to start with setting the stage. So this is really important when we're talking with the general public. Tonight, I probably don't have to convince you all that birds are awesome, but if we're talking to just a general audience at a library, for example, we may have to talk about why birds matter, right? And why their presence on this earth matters. We'll talk about how big the problem of window collisions is. Most people don't realize the enormous magnitude of this problem, and then talk about why it happens. So we'll jump right in. So this is the start of the presentation that I normally give, and I hope it's at least some of it is news to you. So let's talk about why birds matter, right? So being able to see and be around birds, to hear birds, is a really special thing for people to be able to experience. This is a wonderful thing for people to share with their kids and their spouses and family members. There have been research studies that document a significant benefit to people's physical and mental well-being that they can see and hear birds. When we're around birds, it makes life better, right? So there's a lot of emotional and physical benefit that people receive just to be in the proximity of birds. Birds are also really important for ecosystem services. So this ruby-throated hummingbird is pollinating, but birds are also really good at seed dispersal. They eat a lot of things, things that we may or may not like insects, mosquitoes, arachnids, and ticks. They also are eaten by things, so they're a really important part of the food web. And birding is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States. So sales of binoculars and scopes, field guides, as well as restaurant visits and hotel stays, and all sorts of different economic benefits come from people enjoying the hobby of bird watching. So birds matter in a lot of different ways. Depending on who you are, it may matter more or less to you in one of these ways. But they face a really significant problem, which is this man-made problem of windows and buildings. So window collisions cause 599 million birds, as you see on this graphic, to die every single year in the United States. That's a really conservative estimate, and it's this paper that came out that this graphic references is by Scott Loss et al. In 2014. So the paper actually says that it's up to 1 billion birds die every single year in the United States. That study was done in 2014, so that's 10 years ago, and a lot has changed. A lot more buildings have been constructed, and many of those buildings are very glassy, right? Like that's just the style now. So I'm going to put an asterisk next to that, up to 1 billion birds a year, and I'll come back to that in just a couple of slides. But something I want you to notice in this graphic is that almost half of the collisions happen at homes. So 43.6% of collisions happen at homes, right? The places that we live and have control over how our windows appear to birds. And the other half happen at low-rise buildings. A lot of people, when they're first introduced to this issue, think that skyscrapers are the problem, right? But there are relatively few skyscrapers on the landscape. So even though they do in fact kill a lot of birds per skyscraper, it's actually only a small portion of the problem. So these residents and low-rise buildings are the ones that really need to be focused on for making some significant changes to this problem. And humans cause a lot of problems for bird. Habitat loss is the primary reason that birds are declining, as Lisa mentioned earlier on with that graphic, that we've lost about a third of our birds in North America in the last 50 years. Habitat loss is a very big one, but this graphic here shows the things that people directly do to negatively impact birds. So the number one leading cause of bird deaths in this category is outdoor cats. So these would be barn cats, feral cats, house cats that are let outside. They're very cute and I love cats. I adore cats, but they're also very talented and ferocious hunters. So that's the leading cause, but right behind that is window collisions. So this is a significant problem. And the great thing about those number one and number two problems is that there are things that we can control, right? Like we can do this in a relatively easy and quick manner. So I actually find that very empowering, and I hope you do too. So back to this asterisk I mentioned, a study just came out in March, April, that had some really interesting and important conclusions. And one of the things that they found is that half of window collisions leave no evidence. They don't result in a bird dying and laying at the bottom of the window. There's not a stunned bird there that you can see. There's not a smear on the window. There's no evidence that this collision happened. And so unless you see it happen, you know, it's a 50-50 chance that you'll know about it, right? Another thing they found was that 70% of birds that hit windows and flew away eventually died as a result of that collision, either from the injuries caused by it or because they became easier prey. And importantly, the annual mortality, so the number of birds that die every single year is closer to 3.5 billion birds every single year just in the United States. So this is a huge problem. You know, like when I was a kid, I was getting my hair cut and I hear a crash in the room next door and we run into the room and there on the floor is a ringneck pheasant and shattered glass, and then we look up at the wall where the window used to be, and I thought that this crazy occurrence was rare, and it was me and like a handful of other people that saw a window collision happen. And you know, in the time since then, I've learned that this is anything but rare, that most people have seen or heard this happen, and that 3.5 billion birds every single year experience this. So what about birds and windows is so problematic? Some of it has to do with the bird's physiology. So you can see here that this American redstart, her eyes are placed on the side of her head, right? And that's pretty typical for songbirds. They need to be able to see all around them so they can see when a predator is coming. But it changes the way that they perceive depth, especially when they're coming at something like glass. Birds also have hollow bones, which makes them light enough to fly, but it makes them more susceptible to severe injury if they hit something solid. Birds also don't have the benefit of speaking our language and learning lessons that we learn. So from a young age, we're taught that something that looks like this, you know, something that's enclosed in a rectangular frame or a square frame is a window, that there's something solid in between those frames, and that it's something to look through but not pass through. But, you know, birds don't have the benefit of learning this lesson. So even we who know it, we still run into windows and doors sometimes, right? And it's kind of funny when it happens to people, but when it happens to birds, it's really a very different experience. They're moving much faster and they're much more fragile bodies. So this is not a learned behavior that they've been able to learn. In addition, a lot of songbirds especially migrate in the dark of night. So they do this because then they can avoid predators better. and they need to be able to fly by sight. So if there is a cloud cover, they'll fly a bit lower so they can be below the clouds. And if and for some reason that scientists don't fully understand, birds are really attracted to light. So when they see lights coming from the ground and you know, we know that they're cities or communities, it draws them in toward these areas. And while the lights themselves don't kill birds, the glass kill birds, but having the birds coming closer to where glass is a problem. So what I'm going to show you is kind of a cool sciencey thing, technology thing, I should say. So what we're seeing here is a radar of a rain event that's happening on the East Coast, right? We're really familiar with this look. We know that radar is sent out and bounces off of rain droplets, and depending on how dense the rain is in the sky, the radar is able to detect that, and we can see images like this that show us where rain is really heavy and where rain is moving. There's a network of these radar stations all across the country, which allows us to have, you know, our weather reported on. We can also see something similar with bird movements. So in this image here, this is a radar bouncing off of a pretty serious flock of birds. And you can see that the image of birds just looks different, right? You can tell that this is not a rain event. It just looks different this way. So what I'm going to show you is a series of radar maps that show birds in migration one night in October. So this is fall migration. You can see in this image here that there's some rain in like Ohio, New York, some in Seattle, of course, there always is. But there are also a number of birds that are already up in the sky. You can see those, the round shapes of those flocks of birds. So this is 6:41 p.m. And as we move into night, you can see the density of those flocks of birds getting brighter. More birds are moving. So now we're at 11:41 p.m. We're rounding into the wee hours of the morning. And as we move into 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, birds have come down to rest and refuel, to forage, and this is what they see, right? So the sun comes up. Their job at this point is to gather enough food and rest enough that they can do another night of intense migration, just like they did. And for this early part of the morning is when a lot of collisions happen because of this need for birds to be able to forage and rest. So, you know, we can see that this is a window and a reflection of a tree, but a bird would look at this and not see those purple frames as a cue that that's a reflection, and they would try to fly toward a tree like this to hide from a predator or find something to eat or rest. So reflection is a really important driver of window collisions. Another arrangement of windows that causes birds problems is when there's one pane of glass that runs parallel to another pane of glass. It creates what's called a pass-through effect. So birds will, there's an illusion that a bird would be able to fly through this area and be able to make it out the other side. And instead, of course, they hit the glass. So these pass-through effects are common on campuses and in large building settings. Our Bird Collision Corps program, which I'll talk about more in just a bit, has found that skywalks are a hotspot for window collisions. You know, most of that, I mean, that makes sense, right? It's a pass-through effect where birds don't realize there's a hard thing there that they would run into instead of just sky. A four-season patio can also have this. Even in modest homes, you can have a pass-through effect. So for example, at my house, you can look in through the living room window and look out the back patio door into the backyard. And of course, I have my windows, they're bird safe. So I don't have collisions, but you could see how that would be an issue for a bird. So a lot of homes are like this, and it's not an intentional design choice. It just exists. So I encourage you to take a walk around your home or your building or different areas of your community and see if you can find where these pass-through situations exist. Our Bird Collision Corps program is a citizen science program where volunteers receive training, and then in spring and fall migration, they go out once a week to survey the buildings that they're assigned to and look for evidence of birds that have hit windows. So they collect a whole bunch of data. We collate all of that data and analyze it and then share it with the building owners and ideally make some recommendations on ways that they can fix their windows so that they're not problematic for birds. But these 9 species that you see on the screen here are the most commonly found victims of window collisions that our volunteers pick up. And many of our favorite birds are on here, right? Cedar waxwings and ruby-throated hummingbirds, really great warblers and native sparrow species, the dark-eyed juncos that come all the way from way up north to spend winter in Wisconsin. It seems like an impossible thing for a bird to come here for a nice balmy winter, but you know, these birds, they make long distance migrations, and even some that don't. Robins and mourning doves, some of them stay here all winter and some migrate short distances. So it's a wide variety of birds that are affected by window collisions. Most of the birds that we find are songbirds. We not very often will get a raptor or a corvid. We had a couple of turkeys, but for the most part, it's songbirds that our volunteers find. Okay, so that's the first part of the presentation, where we talk about sort of setting the stage and talking about the problem so that people kind of wrap their brains around that this is a real issue that needs to be addressed. So before I move on, I'll just pause for a moment to see if anyone has any questions about what we just talked about. Next, we're going to talk about solutions, but if you have any questions about why this problem exists or the magnitude of the problem, I'd be happy to hear them. You can unmute or type it into the chat. So I'll just pause here for a moment. Okay. There will be another time to ask questions at the end. So again, if you think of a question, be sure to type it into the chat or jot it down so you don't forget. So this next part of the presentation really focuses on what people can do about it, right? So that we're not just doom and gloom about this big problem of birds, but like, let's do something. There are very tangible ways that we can fix this problem, especially at homes, where we have much more control over what's on our windows. So we're going to talk about how do we know if a window treatment works, a few different options for window treatments, and then also some resources for homeowners as well as community organizers. Okay, so you know, now that we know that this problem exists and that it's a really big problem, we can never sort of see houses and windows and buildings the same way again, right? Like once you know about window collisions, you see places where they can exist wherever you look. So a home like this has great big windows. People need windows. We have to be able to access natural light in the outdoors. But we also have to find a way to do that where it doesn't cause harm, right? So, and there are lots of different ways that we can do that. So this is a quote that I really love by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And to summarize, the idea is that our goal as people on this planet is to be helpful and compassionate people. And I think that's why all of us are here tonight, because we want to know what we can do to help birds rather than to cause harm. So with that in mind, let's talk about how we can fix our windows to make them bird safe. So the two goals in any window treatment that we put up is to reduce the transparency of the glass, so reduce or eliminate that pass-through effect, and then also reduce the reflection that is shown on the outside of the glass. So to start, we need to figure out which problem windows, or which windows are the problem windows. It's likely not all of the windows at a house or a building. There are probably just one or two or a handful that are causing problems due to the reflection or the pass-through effect that exists at that spot. So we need to know what windows to start with so we can really focus our time and resources on that. We need to find the style that we like. This is a challenging part because not a ton of people know what the options are beyond the hawk silhouette that they find at Walmart, because it's not a super commonly talked about topic. So and then if you do know what the options are, it can be a bit overwhelming to find the one that suits you. So my goal for tonight is to get you started with some ideas and then give you some resources to explore a few others if you don't like the ones that we talk about tonight. But finding a style you like that is the sweet spot between the aesthetic and the price tag and the difficulty level of installing it. All the window treatments that we do should follow the 2-inch rule with one exception. So this 2-inch rule is based on research that the American Bird Conservancy has done that shows that whatever you put on your window should be no more than 2 inches away from the next thing on your window. So you can see in this picture here that there is, it's like an offset grid of dots, and those dots are 2 inches away from each other, spaced out 2 inches. This is because birds are really acrobatic and they're very good at flying, and so they can try and squeeze their way into a tight spot, especially small birds like hummingbirds. So there's one exception to this rule that we'll talk about in just a few slides. Ideally, whatever window treatment that you do will go on the outside of the glass. So this is to really maximize the effectiveness of the window treatment in reducing the reflection that birds see on the outside of the glass. And then once you put up a window treatment, ideally you've solved the problem at that building, but if not, it's time to repeat the process. So figure out which other windows are problematic and take the steps forward. So how do we know if something is bird safe? Right? Like anyone can say something is eco-friendly. It doesn't mean that it is, but we want to be sure that when we're recommending something, it's based in science and with good reason and rationale. So the American Bird Conservancy, as I mentioned, has done a ton of research on this. They use something called glass testing tunnels, and it looks like this. So it's a long, narrow shed. There are 2 of them in the country, and they're both located at bird banding stations. So on one end of the tunnel is a researcher, and on the other end are 2 panes of glass. One pane of glass has a window treatment applied to it, and the other one doesn't. It's just clear glass. And then in front of both is a mist net so that it catches the bird before the bird hits the window, and the birds are not harmed in this process. So after the bird has been banded, the researcher sends it down the tunnel one time, and that bird has to make a choice. It has to decide if it feels safer going to the window that has no window treatment that it would see as being clear space to fly through, or if they feel safer going toward the window with the window treatment. And you know, obviously if they fly toward the window treatment, that means that the window treatment is probably not very good. So after lots of different birds going down the tunnel, the American Bird Conservancy is able to assign each window treatment a material threat factor. So the lower the number of the threat factor, the better, because that means, for example, if the material threat factor is a 1, it means that the bird flew at that window treatment just 1 out of 100 times. So that's pretty good. It's almost impossible to have a material threat factor of 0 unless you're talking about like brick or drywall. So, you know, if it's not reflective, if it's not see-through at all, it's probably not a window. So all of the different window treatments that we're talking about tonight have a material threat factor associated with them, and I listed it here so we can talk about what those are. Elizabeth asked, I don't understand why you would not recommend people treat all their windows regardless of whether they've seen a problem, especially since I mentioned we almost never realized there's been a collision. That's a great question. You know, it's some of it has to do with what you see reflected in the windows. You certainly have the option to treat all of the windows. But if you take a walk around your house, for example, you can see what's reflected in the glass. And if you see something that is likely problematic, then that would be a good window to treat, even if you haven't seen or heard a collision happen there. In some cases, you'll see, like if you're in a downtown area, you maybe see concrete, and that's likely not a problematic window for birds. But you raise a great point that, you know, this study that just came out shows that half the collisions that happen leave no evidence. And so it's possible that a lot more windows than just a couple have collisions. So, you know, having a place to start is important, especially when we're talking about talking to people who are just learning about this and not quite sure where to start. It's useful to have something a bit smaller and a bit lower lift to get them started. So I hope that helps a little bit. And of course, you can use your best judgment to recommend what you feel strongly about. But that's what I would do. Okay, so the first window treatment that we'll talk about tonight is the good old-fashioned insect screen. This is a really effective window treatment. It has a material threat factor of a 1, which is about as good as it gets. You can see in the image on the left that the insect screen does a really nice job of reducing the reflection that you can see on the window right next to it. The screen offers a bit of bounce if a bird does come at the window. So it's not a hard surface like glass would be. And it does a lot for reducing the transparency of the glass as well. So pass-through effects are minimized. A lot of windows come with insect screens. If you're replacing your windows, you may have to be proactive and ask for insect screens because it's, you know, with like different styles changing, it's a little out of vogue to have window screens come with it. So having, making sure that you ask for it is important. If you have a window that's a crank out or a casement window, of course the insect screen would be on the inside. So if that's the case, you may still have a situation where you need to treat the outside of the glass, even though you have an insect screen on that window, because the insect screen is on the inside of the glass. The next window treatment we'll talk about is a do-it-yourself option using tempera paint or oil-based markers. So tempera paint is a washable, opaque paint that you can find at craft stores for like $3 a bottle. Comes in all different colors. you paint a design on the outside, and you would want to follow that 2-inch rule to make sure that your designs don't leave any gaps that are more than 2 inches apart. This is great for people who are artistic or have kids or grandkids. They want to be able to incorporate into this process and teach them a bit about window collisions and the importance of birds. The drawback with tempera paint is that it can be a bit distracting from the inside if you want to be able to see out your window. Some people don't like that. And also it is washable. So if it rains, your design starts to look a little sad and you have to, wash it off and redo it. Oil-based markers, you can do similar designs, or you can create dots or stripes or however you want to do that. But in order to remove it, you have to use like acetone or a similar product. So, pros and cons of both. Oil-based markers you can find at craft stores or online as well. I think Sharpie makes a version of oil-based markers. So lots of different options with that. The material threat factor for this one is variable because because people put this up themselves, it depends on how they design it. If they leave more than 2 inches between designs, the material threat factor would be different than if they followed the 2-inch rule. So they can't assign a number to this one. But if it's done well, it has a very good score. Another option are these dots, grids. So as Lisa mentioned a bit earlier, Feather Friendly is a company that produces these dots, and we have kit that you can use for outreach purposes that I'll talk a bit more about in a bit. But these dots are really great. They're quite popular. They're semi-permanent stickers that come on basically like a big roll. It's kind of looks like Scotch tape. And then the dots are on the tape already measured out 2 inches apart from each other. So you put the tape up on your window, you really press it on, you pull the tape back, and just the dots remain. And then you go down 2 inches and you do the same thing and go down again until your window is filled with these dots. So because they're semi-permanent, they're good for outdoor use, so they can handle the rain and sun and wind and snow and ice and all the delightful types of weather we get in Wisconsin and other places. I know some of you aren't from Wisconsin, but every place comes with its challenges. So these are rated for 10 years or more, and you can pressure wash them. You can wash your windows over them, and they're flat, so most people don't find that there's like a drip that comes underneath each of the dots. So it's a nice product. A lot of people really like it. Some folks say it takes a little while to get used to looking through your window having these dots up, but that it's sort of like an insect screen where if you are looking at it, you can see it, but your eyes really quickly learn to look past it. So it doesn't, eliminate your view. The material threat factor on this one is around a 7. It depends on the company, but for the most part, it's about a 7. I think it's the last window treatment we'll talk about tonight are a paracord or Zen curtain or bird saver curtain. Those are all different names for the same thing. So this is a window treatment that hangs up on the outside of your window, and it's made of paracord. So paracord is a slippery nylon material that is used in parachutes. So it doesn't get all tangled up, and it doesn't, get gummed up with debris and ice and all different things that, come from being outside. They last a long time. They don't break down easily or quickly. And they move in the breeze, which is why they have the nickname of a Zen curtain, because it's like watching a campfire almost, where it's hypnotic at times. So a lot of people really like that because it's relaxing and it depends on your aesthetic, but folks seem to really like this option. So the idea with making these, you can make it yourself, or you can buy them online. Akopian Bird Savers website has some really nice tutorials on how to make these, and Lisa just put that into the chat. Thank you, Lisa. So if you go to their website, you can find instructions on how to make these curtains, or you can put in the dimensions of your window and they'll make you a kit and send it to you, and all you have to do is just hang it up. The basic idea is that you have something running horizontal at the top of your window. A lot of people use the paracord for that as well. And then you tie strings down to dangle in front of the window from the top to the bottom of the window and all the way across. So you can see in these images that these are spaced out more than 2 inches. And that's because the strings are not attached to the glass the same way that stickers are. And so they're more 3D. And they also are often moving. And so it allows birds to detect that there's something in front of that window. And it doesn't require such tight spacing. So the material threat factor on this one is a 5. These are really a nice option and pretty affordable too if you make it yourself. I bought a spool of 1,000 feet of paracord online for like 25 bucks. So it can go a long, long way. I have a friend, actually Susan, who took these photos, who has this curtain up at her house. She put it up because one day, after a number of collisions happening, red-breasted nuthatch hit her window. It's her favorite bird. So she said, all right, that's enough. I'm going to figure out some way to deal with this. So she made one and put up one of these curtains. And for 2 years, she didn't have any collisions. And then she needed to have her house painted. So the curtain needed to come down, and within 45 minutes of it coming down, a bird hit her window. So, you know, she got the rest of the painting job done as quick as they could and put it back up. But it really goes to show that, you know, the instant results that you can get from putting up these window treatments is really wonderful. Like, this is bird conservation in an afternoon. So I hope that one of these options appeals to you. And if not, there are lots of other ones. Lisa put a link in the chat for the American Bird Conservancy's, I thought I saw that anyways. The American Bird Conservancy's database of all the different products that they offer. I'll also include that in a follow-up email. So you can go through and see which treatments match up with your preference on style and effectiveness. So Reed asks, are we aware of any volunteer groups or small businesses that will go out and install treatments for people who have difficulty on ladders? That's great. So great question. And it seems that many people might wish to do this, but are limited by physical mobility. That's a great point. Some of this is, some of these do require being on a ladder, and in some cases people don't want to do them, or they can't do a window treatment themselves. So if you're in southern Wisconsin, I have a resource for you that I'll touch on here in just a bit. But to summarize, it's a list of contractors that you can call. I've verified that they are that they put up these window treatments, so you can hire them to put up a window treatment for you instead of doing it yourself. So in a lot of cases, it's a paid gig. I don't know of any groups in southern Wisconsin that do this on a volunteer basis, but it's you know, there are resources. A lot of times these companies are window washers or handy people, or I forget who else. It's just like kind of a wide variety of people who put up these window treatments. Pam asks if we'll have access to these slides. Absolutely. I'll send an email afterwards that has a bunch of resources. Okay, so back to window collisions. Another thing that we can do to reduce the number of birds that are in the vicinity of our windows is to minimize light pollution. So, especially during migration, we can make sure that our lights are on motion sensors or timers. A big thing is to make sure lights are pointed downward so that the light is directed toward the ground instead of up in the sky where birds would be more vulnerable to being drawn into it. Closing window shades, using bulbs that aren't quite as bright. But regardless, any sort of treatment with light should be done in combination with glass mitigation or a window treatment. It's not an either or. Birds are drawn in by light, but it's the glass that kills them. And so it's important to make sure that it's not, I turned off my light, so the problem is done. So I hope we keep that in mind. So what are a few things that don't work or don't work as well? As I mentioned earlier on, these silhouettes or a singular shape that's on a window, it doesn't cover enough glass for it to be effective, especially with a hawk like this. A bird will learn really quickly that that's not actually a hawk. And in order for it to be effective, it would have to follow the 2-inch rule. And if there were enough of these hawks on the window that you'd follow the 2-inch rule, you wouldn't have a window anymore, right? It'd be like you couldn't see out of it anymore. So there are much more effective and reasonable options than these silhouettes. And similarly, decals or window treatments that are spaced out more than 2 inches do not work as well. They may help in reducing collisions, but they won't solve the problem entirely. Putting the window treatment on the inside of the glass is sometimes the only thing that we can do, right? In some cases, you live in a condo, for example, or a tall apartment building, and you can't get to the outside of the glass. In that case, you can use your shades, keep your shades about half open, or put up some kind of window treatment on the inside of the glass that will help reduce collisions, and it's absolutely better than nothing. So that's a great thing to do if that's all you can do. But as you can see in this image here, this is the same artwork from the picture on the left is taken from the inside of Penny Library in Madison, and the picture on the right is from the outside. So you can see that there's still a strong reflection in that glass, even though that tempera paint design is up on the window. It's because it's on the inside, not the outside. So it's really ideal to have it on the outside of the glass. Jasmine asked why the 2 inches is the magic number for spacing. This is based on research that American Bird Conservancy has done that shows that birds will try to fit through in spaces that are more than 2 inches, especially small birds like hummingbirds. So that 2-inch spacing is based on the research that they've done to maximize the effectiveness of window treatments. It's a great question. Okay, so what do we do about the birds that we are intentionally drawing into our yards with feeders and bird baths and really great gardens? I'm sure many of you have a number of these features in your yards, and I do as well. Birds are so much fun to be able to see. In cases like that, if you have a bird feeder or a bath or a nest box nearby, you really should treat your window, regardless of whether you've noticed a collision there. It goes back to what, I'm sorry, I think it was Elizabeth said about, just sort of being responsible. And, you may not have seen the collision, but it's likely that feeder is reflected in the glass, and to be, a good, responsible bird feeder person, that glass should be treated to make sure that we're not drawing birds in, and then as a result of that, they die at our windows. So you can see in this image that this homeowner has 2 bird feeders and a nest box that would be reflected in the glass. And they haven't had any collisions because they use this Acopian bird saver window treatment on their windows. So it's a really great, effective option. And regardless of what style you pick out, as long as it fits your needs and your style and your bank account, and it follows that 2-inch rule when applicable, these window treatments can really go a long way to protect these birds that we love and the birds that bring so much joy to our life. So I hope that some of this or all of it was useful to you and that you have some good steps forward if you are looking to solve some window collision problems at your house. So this resources page here is available for a variety of resources. So that top link is the Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance website on preventing collision. So it has a lot of what we talked about here tonight, including a recording of a similar presentation that I gave earlier this year. It has links to products and other ideas. It has that list of contractors that I mentioned earlier for folks who are in Southern Wisconsin. There's also a link on this slide for the Bird Collision Corps program in the Madison area if you're interested in volunteering, or checking that out as a model for what you can do in your own community to be able to study which buildings are problematic for birds and find some solutions. Save Our Songbirds website is on here, and then the American Bird Conservancy website. As I mentioned a number of times, I'm like their #1 fan. They do really great work with window collision studies and offering great resources. So I hope you find some good options there. Okay, so that kind of wraps up what I usually talk about with window collisions with folks from the community. So now let's shift into more of like what you can do and different resources available to you. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic, but just a few ideas that I had in thinking about how you can bring this to your communities. You can host a presentation like this. I'm going to share with you a link to a toolkit. I have template presentations that you are welcome to use. So it has a lot of the same content. You now know this. You can watch the recording of this if you want to, and then you can share it with people in your community. There are lots of different groups that are interested in this topic. You could write an article. I'm not sure why I have write and/or articles, but write articles that can go in your newspaper. You can put them in your neighborhood association newsletter. Lots of different ways to get this out. You can share it on social media for maybe a bit broader of a reach. There's a term I just learned recently called dynamic norming. And the idea is that people are more likely to do something if they see other people are doing it. And so if they see you're doing it and examples of how you're doing it, it just becomes a bit more normalized and helps inspire people. And then in some cases, maybe you want to advocate for a bird safe glass ordinance in your communities. There's some good examples of that in Wisconsin that I can talk about more if you're interested. And there are great resources on the American Bird Conservancy's website. So this is the link to the toolkit page. I'll type it here into the chat as well, so that you can access it easily. But this is a toolkit page that has a bunch of different things that you are free to use. Examples of articles that you can reprint and give the credit to the original author, or you can use it as a starting point for writing your own article. Or there are model ordinances if you're interested in exploring what an ordinance might look like. There are some examples from American Bird Conservancy on that. As I mentioned, there's a presentation template, one for homeowners that's geared toward homeowners and one that's for more larger communities. And then there's also a form you can fill out to receive a free box of the feather-friendly dots. And the idea with that is that it goes towards some kind of outreach purpose. You could come up with your own example windows, like what you see in this photo here. These are windows that I bought at the Restore for $1 a piece. They used to be in a screen door. And I repurposed them to make examples of some window treatments that people seem to like. And often people want to be able to see and touch them in person. And so it's a nice and inexpensive way that you can make these a little bit more accessible to people. So this pack of dots, Lisa has offered to ship them to you for free, or I think just paying for shipping. I'm sorry, Lisa, I didn't mean to misspeak there, but and then you can make your own example of what that looks like. Or if you have, you know, a public space that you can put those dots up in, you can use those in that way as well. And if you think that other resources would be useful, I would be happy to hear your ideas and add to it. This toolkit I'm envisioning as a living website, so we can add things as needed or modify or whatever we want to do with it. So I think that's all I have. And I would be happy to take some questions or some suggestions, ideas for how you might want to. So Lisa just said the SOS will ship a box for entirely free. So the web page has a form you can fill out for that. So thank you, Lisa. So if you have ideas for like how you might want to use this information in your community, what types of resources you might need for that, or questions, I would be happy to hear any and all of that. So feel free to unmute or type it into the chat. There's also a fly flying around this room, so it might cross in front of the camera now and again. Any questions? Okay, great. Well, if you think of anything, please feel free to reach out, or if you end up doing a presentation or writing something that you share with your community, please let us know. I'd love to see what you end up doing with this and how you think we can make this topic reach more people in Wisconsin and save more birds in general. So thank you all very much for being here and for all you do for birds. And I hope to talk with you soon. Thanks, everyone.